Hi, my name's Jenny Murray. Last year, many families experienced the consequences of diseases that could have been prevented by vaccines. Pain and suffering, missed work and school, amputations, death, and the loss of a loved one. Diseases like meningitis, whooping cough, chickenpox, influenza, and others are vaccine preventable. Yet families continue to experience these serious repercussions because of them. West Virginia Immunization Network urges you to understand the seriousness of vaccine-preventable diseases and to help raise awareness that vaccines are safe, effective, and necessary to protect our families and communities. What you're about to see are the stories of 5 families whose lives have been forever changed by vaccine-preventable diseases. The first story is that of Julie Moyes. Julie lost her sweet infant son Ian to influenza, the flu. After 2 doctor visits and efforts to treat his flu symptoms, Ian's parents thought that he was improving. But when he went into respiratory arrest, the doctor's efforts could not save the 6.5-month-old. Ian had the first of 2 vaccinations against influenza and was just weeks away from the second when he became ill. It was just 36 hours from his first symptom to his last breath. Ian is just one of the faces of vaccine-preventable disease.
We lost Ian less than 30 hours after his first symptom. We had taken him into the doctor twice. Both times they told us that he had the flu, sent us home to treat his symptoms, keep him hydrated, and follow up. That evening, he started panting while he was breathing, so we took him into a children's urgent care center. They tested Ian for influenza A and RSV. The test came back negative for RSV, but he did test positive for influenza A. We were very relieved at the time. It was just the flu. I'm a mother of 3. We've gone through flu seasons before. We could take him home, treat his symptoms, and keep him hydrated is what the doctor ordered. She also told us if he wasn't better within 48 hours to take him back to our pediatrician and follow up. Ian didn't make it 48 hours. The next day we lost Ian to complications of the flu. After Ian died, we started looking at statistics about the flu and did not realize that 36,000 Americans every year die of influenza. On average, 100 children die every year from the flu. The year that Ian died, there was an estimated 64,000 deaths due to the flu.
Varicella, otherwise known as chickenpox, is highly contagious and vaccine preventable, and it can be a bigger deal than you may think. Next, you'll hear from Melissa Papa. Melissa is a young woman who suffers from severe chronic nerve and muscle pain due to a serious secondary bacterial infection she developed as a result of chickenpox. At the time of the infection, she was hospitalized and lucky to live. When Melissa contracted chickenpox, there was not a vaccine for it. Now there is a vaccine that can prevent chickenpox, and Melissa urges parents to immunize their children. Chickenpox is not a safe children's disease.
My name is Melissa Papa, and when I was in the 1st grade, I contracted the chickenpox, which at the time was commonplace. There wasn't a vaccine for it, and it's generally accepted that you would get the chickenpox in your childhood. I got the chickenpox, and I developed a secondary infection from scratching them. I went to the hospital, and they discovered that I had osteomyelitis in my left leg. I went into septic shock from there and was put on a respirator because I stopped breathing on my own. Miraculously, I ended up coming off the respirator after they told my parents I had a 50% chance of living. I went home and I was given a brace for my leg. My leg ended up healing so fast that it grew 1/4 of an inch longer than the other leg, and that seemed to be fine until I grew up, got older, and stopped growing. My bones stopped growing, and then I started having severe chronic nerve pain and muscle pain. And I had a few years where I was basically felt limited and debilitated because I wasn't able to work and go to school. I ended up taking a semester off of school and recovering. And so today I feel that I've come out well on the other side, but I think that something that could have been prevented clearly through a vaccine, and I would like to see that other people wouldn't have to share the same suffering.
My own family has been affected by vaccine-preventable disease. As an infant, my daughter Natalie was exposed to pertussis, whooping cough. She was too young to have been vaccinated against the disease, but if the adults around her had been immunized, then perhaps she wouldn't have become so sick. While it might seem like just a cough or a cold to an adult, whooping cough can be a killer for infants. Fortunately, my baby made it through, but so many other families are not so lucky. This is my daughter, Natalie. She was exposed through a relative to pertussis, which is also known as whooping cough. Whooping cough is a vaccine-preventable disease. Natalie was too young to have been vaccinated for whooping cough, but her family should have been. As a result of her exposure to pertussis, she needed to have help breathing because whooping cough does attack your lungs. Her heart rate got extremely high, 230 beats per minute. She's going to go into respiratory failure, and she's going to have her heart stop beating because of this disease, which is, for a young adult, may appear to be just a cough or a cold. But when an infant is exposed to pertussis, it could kill them in a very rapid fashion. And that's what we were faced with. The decision was made ultimately to try an experimental drug to get the heart rate down, and we had to sign papers to allow this to happen. This particular drug was being used in an experimental stage at that time, and it was being used on heart patients much older after surgery to get their heart rates down. I'm very happy to say it succeeded in getting the heart rate down for Natalie, and that she survived this ordeal after about a month in the hospital, a lengthy stay in which she needed to have some physical therapy afterwards, and we were able to see how big her file was after she was released, and it was pretty thick. It was absolutely amazing. Frankie Miley and her husband Bob lost their only son, Ryan, to a vaccine-preventable disease. Ryan was a bright young man, bound for college and working on his pro status in golf. On Father's Day, Ryan became ill. He had a fever and complained of an earache. Frankie made a doctor's appointment for the next morning, but later that evening, she realized he needed immediate attention. He had contracted meningitis. Within just 24 hours of his first symptom, Ryan was gone.
Within 24 hours, Ryan would be gone. Ryan became ill with a fever and an earache. The early morning hours of Monday, I called the doctor and told him that Ryan wasn't feeling well. But being in EMS for many years, I checked Ryan for meningitis. I asked him if his neck hurt, if his head hurt, and he said, "No, Mom." And I turned on the light, and I could literally see Ryan's blood vessels rupturing all over his body. It looked like road maps. It looked like hickeys. It looked like strawberry patches, like bruises, literally all over his body. I called my doctor back and said, "My God, I think Ryan has meningitis." And he said, "Get him here quick." We got to the hospital, and we got out of the car, and I said, "Come on, baby." And I was helping him get across the road to get into the door of the hospital entrance. And we got on the elevator, and he collapsed, and I carried my 6'2.5" son into the emergency room screaming, "Somebody help me, Ryan has meningitis." And they got him on a gurney, and Ryan looked at me and he said, "Mom, am I going to be okay?" And I didn't answer him because I knew that he probably wasn't at that point. He was beginning to really turn purple, and he was just declining really fast. We got him into an ER treatment room, and he began to vomit blood. And we began to see blood come from his ears and his eyes and his mouth. And then Ryan's heart stopped. And they pronounced him at 10:53 a.m. on June 22nd.
Our last story is Teresa's. Teresa Menard lost her precious daughter Jane to a vaccine-preventable disease. Another beautiful young life lost to meningococcal meningitis. Jane was a senior in college when she died. She was about to graduate from college and get married. She died within 36 hours of her diagnosis. Jane didn't stay in the dorms during school. Thus, during her freshman orientation, a physician advised against the very vaccine that may have saved her life.
This is my daughter Jane. Her physicians and counselors told her that she didn't need to have the meningitis vaccine because she didn't live in a dorm. She was going to a community college and they didn't have dorms and she would be commuting from home. So she started college. She had 1 semester left and she contracted meningitis. She was working one afternoon the day before Christmas Eve and she called me and said she didn't feel well, that she was going to go to her fiance's house and just lay down for a while. So I said, well, what's wrong? What do you feel? And she said that she had a fever and a real bad headache, and she was going to just lay down for a while. 3 o'clock in the morning, she came meet me, and she said, Mom, I really don't feel well. I think I have to throw up, and I think that your thermometer's broken. So I said, well, what makes you say that? She said, it said my temperature was 95. I ran to get a book that I had had since my girls were little. It had like a flow chart and where you could say it had the symptoms and you would kind of follow the symptoms. Do you have a headache? Do you have nausea? Do you have discomfort looking into the light? And as you would follow the flow chart, it went to the end of the road was take this person to an emergency room. When the doctor came in, he looked at her and he said, something is wrong. They rushed her off to the ICU, and within 15 minutes, he had called in an internist, and they had ran the spinal tap and done their blood work and everything, and the internist came and talked to us and said that it was meningitis. By 6 o'clock that evening, he had come back and he had said, we've run some tests and there's no brain activity. And at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, she coded. We heard the code go out for her, and we just, dead silence, because we knew she had had a heart attack and hemorrhaged, and she died.
Don't let what happened to our families happen to yours. Take your best shot against vaccine-preventable diseases and protect your family. Go to immunizenow.org to learn more about the vaccines recommended for both children and young adults. Vaccines prevent dangerous diseases and save lives. Immunize now.